Is 1-800 Hot Night a fun night or a hot mess? Let's find out now. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watch Your Pass. Today I'm talking about 1-800 Hot Night, which is coming to theaters and on demand on November 4th, 2022. It is an indie coming-of-age film that has this nice balance of fun and seriousness. It's about some kids growing up and trying to kind of straddle that line between being a kid, but also dealing with more adult issues. I really loved it. It had a fantastic festival run. It's now coming to theaters and on demand. I definitely think you should check it. My hot take is I think you should watch it. It's a good indie coming-of-age film with a really great cast and a nice balance of childhood wonder and grown-up challenges. So I'm going to tell you a little more about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, but they're all very minor. I definitely think you should watch it. And then maybe talk briefly about the ending. As you can imagine, if I get into the ending section, there will be spoilers. So if you don't want to know what happens at the end of the film, turn it off at the ending section. I'll keep it spoiler free up until that point, so you can just watch, get my thoughts. But if you don't want to know what happens in the movie, you might not because there are some surprises. Skip the ending part. But first, I guess to answer the initial question, 1-800 Hot Night has a very provocative title, but the content is not like super racy. It's about some kids who want to essentially call a sex line and, do what kids want to do. They're curious, they're exploring, but that is just the jumping off point to then just kind of chronicle this crazy night that they have, just kind of being kids, but also dealing with some of the more adult challenges that are happening in their lives. Some of it is, their own maturity, becoming more independent, being interested in girls, but then some of it is also issues where these kids are forced to kind of like step up and be more adult before they're kind of ready. There's family issues, there's issues at home, there are things that happen that are outside of their control, and these kids are kind of forced to grow fast. But this movie does have this really nice balance of like childlike wonder because these kids are still kids. They joke around, they have fun, they kind of goof off. But also when they have to confront these bigger challenges, they have to step up pretty quickly. So things I liked about this movie. The first, I really love the cast. Look, it's always a risk when you've got young actors playing key roles, and this movie's three main stars are all fairly young, but I think they did a fantastic job. They had really great chemistry. They portrayed very different characters, but did so naturally, and their interactions were just really fun to watch. It felt organic. It didn't feel scripted. It didn't feel like these kids were acting. It felt like they were just out there having fun and just enjoying their time, which is really what you want in a movie like this because it gets you into the characters, it gets you into the journey, and really makes you root for them. The second thing I really love is the cinematography. The film takes place all at night in LA, and there are some very beautiful scenes. Look, LA is a city that you can have some very, very dark scenes and some very beautiful night scenes. There's so many lights, there's so many colors. And this film does a really good job. The night scenes actually really pop, which is weird because they're dark. They do a really good job of lighting it, letting you see what's going on, but also making it dark enough that it still is this kind of forbidden time. It's this like fun time when they can just be themselves and there's no one else around. There's no adults, there's nothing else going on. And that all kind of contributes to the overall feel in this film. The third thing I liked is the music. The music, there aren't a ton of songs. I mean, look, it's an indie film. Songs are tough to get, but they do a really good job of what they have. There's some nice hip hop at the start when they're really goofing off. There's some kind of techno music when it gets a little bit more serious. And there are some, serious sounding songs that come in when they have to deal with some more adult challenges. And so it's a nice kind of set of music that comes in at the right times and really helps to contribute to the mood. And the last thing I like, look, I've said it a couple times, I love the content of this film. It strikes a nice balance between these kids just kind of out having fun, misbehaving, breaking rules because they're out at night and doing kids mischief, but then also being forced to kind of confront some challenges that are outside their comfort zone and really outside what they should be confronting at this age. And it does a nice job of balancing those two. You'll have maybe a more serious scene, and then the kids will just be kids again, and then you'll have some more serious content. It does tend to get more serious as the movie goes on, as you'd expect in a coming of age movie, but they do a really good job of balancing it. Things I didn't love, and look, there's only a few. None of them are major. Watch this movie. It's a really good film. But the first thing I didn't love is there's this kind of strange story turn that they need to do to kind of force the issue in this movie, but it felt a little contrived. It felt a little pushed. And so it was minor. I didn't, it's a short scene. It's an important scene. I didn't love it as much. It didn't feel as natural as some of the other scenes in the film. So there's a minor criticism there. And the second thing I didn't love, but again, something very minor. It felt like maybe the timeline wasn't as consistent as it should have been. I can't tell when this actually took place because it's not really set in any specific time. It feels like it's set in like the mid 90s because I don't think any of the kids have cell phones. I don't think any the adults, maybe some of the adults have cell phones. The kids using a payphone. I don't remember when the last time I saw a payphone was. And so it feels like a movie that's supposed to be in the mid 90s, but then you have some more modern aspects. Like one of the characters is vaping. There's a reference to like Pokemon cards, which came out like in the 90s, but the kids are like, oh, I played that when I was, years ago. They're young, maybe years ago was like 2 years ago. And there's just a few little things here and there that feel like maybe the timeline is not as consistent. The main character, Tommy, has a paper route. I don't remember when kids had paper routes, especially in LA. But there is also some discussion about how like newspapers are on their way out, which I think is more of like a late 90s, early 2000 thing. So again, the timeline just feels a little bit mixed up. Again, not a big deal. It's still a great movie. It's still a fun movie. Definitely watch it. So I'm going to go briefly into the ending. It's not going to be like an immersive discussion. I just want to talk a little bit about the things I really liked about the ending. So if you don't want to know what happens in this film, turn this off now. Turn it off now. Go watch the movie. You can see it in theaters on demand. So in 1-800 Hot Night, these kids, they're forced to confront some issues. Basically, Tommy's dad and stepmother get arrested, and so the house is cleared out. His little brother, who's like 3, super cute kid, gets taken, by child custody or taken by a social worker, and they're kind of getting Tommy ready to go as well. And he bolts. He gets out when the social worker's back is turned, and him and his 2 best friends, O'Neill and Steve, just gonna go out on the town, try to get away from the police, figure out what they're gonna do, just find a place to slip day. And one of the things they have to do is get some money. And so Tommy goes and kind of starts hustling some of his paper route people. He like goes to them and is like, hey, like I need to collect the money now. So he's trying to get enough money just to get a hotel room so they can sleep. And one of the last people that he tries to hustle kind of turns it on his head. It's this guy who like feels like maybe he's a criminal, maybe like a drug dealer of some sort. He takes him in, and then essentially him and 2 other people rob Tommy, intimidate him. They just kind of like their lines are pretty random. Their motivation is fairly random. They seem to be well off. So I don't know why they steal money from a kid, but in any event, that happens. They have no money, and so now they've got no money, no place to stay. They end up going to one of their friends' houses, and it seems like a fun night. Tommy and O'Neill get into a fight over a girl, and so O'Neill punches Tommy. He then leaves him, and Steve, who is O'Neill's cousin, goes as well. So now Tommy's kind of on his own. But we have this through line of 1-800 Hot Night. And so at the start, the kids call it because they're very curious. They want to know, what is this like forbidden phone line? In the middle, he calls it to try to like actually talk to the person. He seems to think that he has feelings for this phone operator. And so he calls her again, and she starts to open up because he's like basically telling her about everything that's happening. She seems to get concerned. Now, when he is on his own and his friend beat him up and he doesn't know what to do, he calls her again, and he just basically kind of tells her about what happened that day. And so she's like, like, tell me where you are. And it feels like she's actually going to like take care of him. So she comes out with probably her pimp, maybe boyfriend. It's unclear, but it's one of her friends who is bigger and also seems to be a criminal. And so she and her friend pick Tommy up and they drive to Tommy's house. He's like, I just want to get away. Like, I don't want to go into like a foster care. And so they get back to his house, and Tommy starts walking through his, parents' house, his house, and starts collecting his things. And this is a really beautiful scene because he's kind of going through, and he's been trying to stay away from this place all night. First because he wanted to be with his friend, and then because this is where the cops were. But as he's going through, he starts to see things that like remind him of his life and how much he loves his life. He sees this little hammer that his baby brother, his baby stepbrother, he makes sure to keep saying it's his stepbrother, plays with. He's trying not to really acknowledge him. I think maybe he doesn't love the fact that his dad remarried. And so he just kind of like is standoffish. But when he sees this hammer, I think he starts to think about his brother and the times that they've had. He finds like a shirt that his dad had and some other things, some toys that they were playing with, some like games that they were playing. And so he starts to kind of reminisce. And then he walks into one of the rooms and he sees Eva, who's the phone sex operator, and Biggie kind of starting to grab his dad's stuff. Some pills, some things that his dad and stepmom were selling. He gets upset because he thought that they were like genuinely caring for him, and he realizes that they were just hustling him too. Biggie starts to get rough with him, and Eva seems to try to step in and break it up and kind of play mediator. Now Tom's upset. They get in an argument, and now the cops kind of show up. Biggie gets in his car, or he's about to drive away. He's like, Eva, get in, Eva, get in. Eva, I think, actually cares about the kid at this point. So she stays with him, but Tommy just bolts. He can't trust these people. He has no one else to turn to, so he just bolts and starts running away. He runs to this electrical field that they talk about a couple times about how you can't go through it because it's going to electrocute you. And I love this because that is definitely something that I thought when I was a kid. Like you go through, you like don't want to pass under the power lines because you're worried that you're going to get shocked. Like it definitely is a really good kind of like kid thing to think about. And so he's running through this. Eva's chasing him. He gets to one of the electrical towers and grabs it. I think he's just thinking like, I'm done. I don't have anything else to live for. So he grabs it. And as you'd expect, nothing happens because they don't have like live electricity flowing through them. And that's when Eva shows up. She kind of is trying to console him, trying to like come to terms with him. So she talks to him more about her life. And this is when she really opens up because he just wants to run. He wants to get out of there, doesn't want to stop. And she's like, no, you can't do that. Like, you can't run. You can keep running. You can do that, but it never really fills you up inside. Like, you don't get the emotion. You don't get the love that you expect. You just kind of keep running. And he's like, that's what I want. It's like, no, that's not what you want. You care about stuff. Like, he's crying because of all the things that he misses. And she's like, no, you can't. Like, this is not the life for you, essentially. And so she then kind of tells him, essentially, he's got to find his spark. He's got to find the one thing that he's really good at and that he can kind of do to fulfill his life. She says, like, my skill is phone sex. Like, I'm a really good phone sex operator, which makes sense because that's how this whole movie starts. And Tommy's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And she's like, you'll find it out. Like, stay a kid, be a kid, and find it out later. So she starts walking him back. We see the cops coming. There was one officer who was really nice to Tommy at the start, and the social worker who's just trying to like help him, deal with this. They are both driving up. They've kind of like been tracking them, following them all night. And that was actually another thing, very minor thing I didn't love. This cop at the start was starting to open up to Tommy. There was a line when he's like, I wasn't much older than you when, and you don't know what happened. I think you assume that maybe he was a foster kid and kind of understanding, or maybe something bad happened to him when he was a kid. You never find out what it is. I wish I knew. I think we can guess, and maybe that's part of the joy of this movie is not knowing. But I wish I knew because he was an interesting character. I want to learn more about him. But in any event, the cop and the social worker come up. Tommy goes with them. As he's getting taken away, Eva like comes out. Eva, you can tell that Eva actually cares about him. She's like, Tommy, call me. You call me, right? And the social worker's like, who are you? And she's like, I'm his friend. And she's like, does he have your number? Do you want me to write it down? And it's like, he knows my number, which again goes back to the whole through line of 1-800-HOT-NIGHT. So Tommy gets taken back to the police station. And I think he's concerned. He's not sure what to do. But then he is at the police station, and his little brother comes out, sees him, and just runs to him. And it's this really wonderful scene where he is kind of like accepting the responsibilities that he has, but still choosing to stay a kid, right? He's going into whatever the next challenge will be. If it's foster care, if it's some, other family, he's not going to run and be independent. He's going to stay with his family, at least the family he has, and figure out what's next and figure out what he needs to do. So that's 1-800-HOT-NIGHT. Again, it's a really good film. I think you should definitely check it out. You can check it out in theaters and on demand. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.